Okay, we're recording. Everyone's agreed to be recorded. This empathy circle is on the topic of why is empathy banned, censored, and canceled in NVCa and B groups. And the intention of this empathy circle, at least my intention, is to create a culture of empathy. And that means to nurture mutual listening, understanding, care, trust, and support, and a constructive relationship going forward. And we do that using mutual empathic listening, and the three of us know how to do that. And if there's anyone else that wants to understand the process, you can go to empathycircle.com and also check the description down below. There'll be a link to it and it explains how the empathy circle process works. I want to give just a quick introduction to the situation, just for anyone that's watching, so they sort of have a context. And the situation is there's an NVC, nonviolent communication, couple of groups on Facebook called NVCa, B, and T. And in some of the groups, there was a conflict between the administrators and person Adrian, that they were, just having conflict. It was kind of going on and on. People were kind of judging, criticizing. I think even getting banned in the group. And then Barbara reached out to me and tagged me and said if I would do some kind of a mediation. I said, sure, I would do it, but I would like it to be public, that it's totally recorded and everyone can see it. Since the conflict is recorded, she said, okay. I did a pre-circle with Barbara, Adrian, Samuel, Chris, and then, posted those. And the administrator, Ray, of those groups, he got really upset about it. He banned me from those groups of A and B, and I couldn't respond to him. Some I could see, and then in other groups I was totally banned. And he's saying that the banning was for protection. He felt that people can't make their own decisions. He has to make the decision for them, whether they take part in a public recorded empathy circle or not. So that's sort of the context, just a quick, and there's a lot more to it. And so with that being said, we're gonna have, let's do 5-minute turns, and whoever would like to start can start the process, and we'll go right into the empathy circle.
I would like to start, and I'd like to speak to you, Nellie.
Okay.
So I want to just catch up with some facts. Adrian created a new group since he actually was not banned. And my understanding is that he chose to leave because of the hostility and create a new group, something called Nonviolent Communities and Dynamics. And I went there and I started one thread and I began to criticize Dominic Barter. I said that Dominic Barter is full of shit, but I also detailed why. And he came down on me hard and said, you can't speak that way here. And he tried to control the way I was speaking in my comment. And I said, no, please don't bully me. I'm in my own thread. And he gave me a 24-hour ban. He deleted my comment calling Dominic full of shit, and he gave me a 24-hour ban. And currently, I'm in discussions about some of this in the Restorative Circles Facebook group, where Dominic has made a proposal about that group. And it's relevant for what's happening here because people in the NVC groups, they've been doing this for a long time, but to this day, follow me there and attack me there. And so the conflict is spilling out into that Restorative Circles group. I would be happy to have it in one of the NVC groups where it started, but I'm not able to. So I'm kind of like the Dalai Lama in, exclusion, having my, it's a bad comparison. I'm having my conflicts in a different place where I can have them. And
maybe you want to get a reflection.
Yes, please. Yes.
All right. I hear that you want to describe what's happened since where Edwin has ended, and the reason this group was created has been Adrian Oertli, and he has created a new group for himself. He left because he didn't like the hostility in the NVCa groups. So he self-excluded, and then he created this new group. You were writing there, you were writing a post that Dominic Barta is full of shit, and you were reasoning why you get a sense that you're entitled to say that. And then Adrian, as the administrator of that group, was putting a lot of pressure on you to reformulate this in a more kind way. And when you refused to do that, he deleted your post and he banned you for 24 hours. Right now, there's some discussions ongoing in a group that is where Dominic Barta and you are both present. The Dominic Barta made a proposal about changing the structure of the group, and
there are people from the NVC groups who follow me there and attack me there. Mm-hmm. And I want to, this point about self-exclusion is important, I think, because as far as I can tell, Adrian actually did self-exclude. And this term may come up again, and I want to say, I was kicked out of the NVC India group today, and I was told that I self-excluded, and that's not true. I did not choose to leave. People are mangling the term self-exclusion to say, no, it's your fault you got excluded, and that's different. Blaming me for the admins removing me is different than what I would call self-exclusion. So I want to make that point.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that's really important to you is that to state that you did not self-exclude. You see self-exclusion happening when you choose to leave, click on the leave group button, and if admins force to exclude you because of something they think you have done wrong, that's still exclusion.
Yes. And is that my time? So no.
In my
on the topic of empathy, I just want to say that I have really been asking people to empathize, to give an empathic reflection of what I've said in text in the Restorative Circles group, or even of anyone else, and it's been very difficult to get. And when I did, I asked, I said, there's dozens of people who are applauding Dominic's proposal, and I said, there's so much, it's almost 100% approval, no dissent. Is there any understanding of Dominic's proposal? Can anyone just paraphrase what Dominic's proposal is? And I got 3 sentences, and it was very clear. The paraphrase was, yeah, we want to create a group to segregate the disruptive people so that the non-disruptive people can work in peace. And that's very telling.
Yeah, so people have been following you towards the NVC group, from the NVC group to the Restorative Circles group, and attacking you there. You have challenged the post by Dominic Barta there, and there has been a lot of consent, a lot of people applauding this post of Dominic Barta, and you were asking if that's a good idea to hear no dissent. And then you asked people if they could paraphrase what the proposal actually is, and what one answer you got to that was, yeah, let's segregate the people who are causing trouble.
So that the non-disruptive
Yeah.
people can work in peace. Yeah.
such that
I think you froze, Nelly.
Your connection. But the last part there was so that the non-disruptive people could work in peace. So
Yes.
uh,
I feel heard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll go next then until she comes back.
Okay.
And I made it 6-minute turns because it seems like might need a little bit more time to fully express. So
Okay.
I'll speak back to you.
Listening.
Yeah, so you mentioned Adrian. So I did want to make it a point that I've done 2 pre-circles with Adrian. I did 4 pre-circles with participants in NVCa, and Adrian was one. And it's the second time I've done a pre-circle with him. And he does not, I have never done an empathy circle with him. He gets his pre-circles and he always has excuses for why he can't do an empathy circle. So yeah, I just want to have that out there.
So you've done 2 pre-circles with him so far, and he's making excuses for not participating in the actual empathy circle, and this seems to be a pattern.
Yeah, there was a conflict. He's this conflict in XR, Extinction Rebellion, Switzerland, that he's sort of been excluded or banned or something from there. And, I tried to get an empathy circle going there. And then one person finally said that she would do an empathy circle, but that she did want it private. And I said, oh, okay. And then Adrian agreed to it being done privately. And then when it came, and then like a couple of days before, he canceled. And then he never was willing, he never made an effort to really try to schedule it. It was, oh, I have no time, I have no time. So he's posting all this stuff out there. He's getting, getting heard, but he doesn't seem to be willing to take part in an empathy circle. So I think that needs to be, kind of be put out there too.
Let me see. So the other conflict was in XR Switzerland. You offered to do an empathy circle. There was another person who stepped forward and said, I will do it, but in private, which Adrian agreed to. And then again, he didn't follow up with it. And so he's putting all this information out there, but he's showing he's not willing to hear or to come
Right.
at least to the empathy circle. And you want to put that out there as, to the whole story. Yeah.
So that's part of it. And the other part is, I guess, about Ray, that Ray is, I invite him to take part in Empathy Circle, and I had put it out there that it would be recorded. And the reason I wanted it recorded was, first, the conflict is already public and recorded out there for forever. And as long as all that conflict is there, public, why not just have it continue to be public in a forum like this, a public recorded forum? So that was the first part.
Let me catch that. So regarding Ray, he doesn't want to, his point of contention is that he doesn't want to have it out in the public. But you're saying that the conflict is already public. The conflict issues and dialogue and attacks are happening in text publicly. So why not continue in a public forum?
And he's kind of saying he's wanting to protect other people, but why doesn't he take part? He's an experienced NVC practitioner, years of experience. And you'd think that someone who's sort of a leader and a teacher would be able to, deal with something like this publicly. So I see that as kind of a strange thing. I mean, I would not have him be a trainer for me. If he can't be out there publicly, just having an empathic dialogue. It seems to me it puts into question his sort of authority or skill in terms of empathy in his trainings.
Yeah. So his reason for not doing it publicly and recorded is to protect others. That doesn't explain why he's not willing to do it himself. He is a kind of person of authority and even, you know, a trainer, I think. And you would think that someone who's teaching empathy and doing that would themselves be able to show up and
Yeah.
be empathic. And it kind of puts his ability to be a teacher. You wouldn't want him as a trainer,
Right.
a person like that as a trainer.
And so finally, I mean, there's a lot more, but I just, this whole notion of protection, that protection can get kind of extreme. I mean, the concentration camps were protection against the Jews and all the undesirables in the culture, right? It's like, oh, we got to protect society from all these undesirables. So protection can be used as a, you know, a form of, you know, really, it can go to the extreme that those are the rationales of protection, that protection can go to, is protecting society. You start with banning, and then it just keeps can keep escalating.
Yeah, so protection as a justification can be taken to an extreme. In the case that the concentration camps in World War II were justified that they were protecting society from the Jews and the other undesirables. And so if you take the argument of protection to its extreme, it can be actually just violent oppression.
Yeah, and I understand protective use of force is stopping immediate harm, but then you try to bring everyone into a dialogue right afterwards. Say, okay, we're going to keep you from like physically striking someone, just stopping you, but I still see your humanity, and let's have an empathic dialogue. So that's what I see as protective use of force.
Yeah, so the principle of the protective use of force necessitates the immediate cessation of harm, and then also includes an addressing of the cause or the underlying dynamic, rather than keeping the force in place indefinitely.
Right. Yeah. So I feel heard, and I think when I go back to Nellie, since it was your turn to speak and you dropped out. So
I'm good too.
You're good. Okay, we'll go with James then.
Ben, would you listen to me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything said so far. The protective use, especially this protective use of force, that was invoked to remove me 2.5 years ago. All of the people who chanted protective use of force, and I want to name that it's, you know, Kerry Buck, who is also a British trainer. She was big on saying that it was the protective use of force. None of them followed up with any restorative activities.
Okay, so
yeah.
Yeah, so you're joining about this idea about the protective use of force being misused, because the idea is to, you know, to use force to stop immediate harm being done, but then to create connection and dialogue again. So back then, two and a half years ago, when you were excluded, everybody was chanting the idea of protective use of force, but nobody, and you want to name Sari Buck as one of the people who was very hot on that issue, but none of them have followed up afterwards to create any kind of dialogue.
Yeah. And the irony is that they're on, you know, another person is Janine. And I mentioned Janine because she is in what's called the conflict thread for the New Futures process. Some of this is just all BS, but there is a lack of follow-up. Excuses are made, and then there's no follow-up. And just lost my train of thought.
Well, shall I capture that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so you also want to name the person Janine, who's involved in the New Futures project, and you're experiencing with her a lack of follow-up. So excuses are made and there's no follow-up.
Yeah. Oh dear. So until I remember what I was going to say, I just want to say that this whole ordeal, there's a larger picture to it. It's not a problem that's unique to the NVC community and aversion to conflict. If anything, there is probably, compared to other groups and society in general, there is a greater willingness to engage in conflict in that community. And, I remember, with regards to Ray and I did have one conversation, one mediated conversation. He came to the table. He made it, it had to be not recorded and in private, and this was 2 years ago. Not recorded in private. He acted atrociously. I don't think I had a single opportunity to speak in that whole conversation. And the mediator allowed that to happen, and I don't even blame the mediator because I saw that once I started to speak, Ray ended it. He made a demand on me, and then he cut off all contact. And that is exactly what he does not want people to see. That's the exact, it's not about protecting other people. It's because he does not have the ability to show up and have an empathic dialogue. And I heard, Ben, that he expected you only to post in NVCa if you were making empathic comments. Make a list of his comments in the group and tell me if any of them are empathic. I'm going to guess that 99 out of 100 are him giving advice and him telling other people what to do and are non-empathic.
Okay,
And,
can I capture that so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first point I might have lost, you might have to help me there. There was something about...
it's not solely an NVC community problem. They actually do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like you actually see a higher level of conflict engagement with the NVC community than other communities.
Yes.
But this thing about Ray, this was the thing you forgot. You did have a conversation with him, mediated conversation with him 2 years ago. He came to the table and there was a mediator there too. And in the entire conversation, all it was Ray just talking. And every time you tried to get a word in, like Ray just shut you down. He just ended it. And you don't blame the mediator because Ray was just acting so strongly that it, like every time you tried to talk, he shut you down.
Right. There was nothing like a back and forth where he empathized with me at all. Zero.
There was,
there was no even parroting. There was nothing.
There was no back and forth at all. There was no receptivity to you at all. It was just him talking. And that's what you think he doesn't want people to see, and why you think he doesn't want to do a recorded conversation, because you don't think he has the ability to control himself in that kind of situation.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just see a massive amount of
Who are you
lack
speaking
of
to?
skill.
Who are you speaking
Who am I
to?
speaking to? I'll speak to Nelly.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I just experienced a massive amount of lack of skill in the NVC community, and a very high. I think the difference between the level of skill that people think they have and the level of skill that people actually have is very different when it comes to dealing with conflict.
I hear that you have a sense that there is, in the NVC community, there's many people who are feeling confident that they can engage with conflict, but when they are really facing conflict, it's a completely different thing. So there's a huge gap between reality and the fantasy people are entertaining.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think there's, a little bit of a bubble in some situations, so that people find themselves in situations that they can easily handle, which does create this perception that they have this massive amount of skill in dealing with conflict, but it's only within certain parameters that they're able to do that so well.
So you see that this is nourished. This self-perception is nourished by that the people can actually be very skillful in a closed system with clearly defined boundaries, like yeah. And then they see they can apply, they can handle conflict very well. But when some of the parameters of this maybe sandbox change, then it's no longer safe, and they are not able to handle conflict anymore.
Yeah, that's right. I think in particular, the level of skill of participants in NVCa, B, like all these places, the level of skill is quite low. So people, have quite a primary understanding of empathy. And I think that is what Ray Taylor is referencing when he talks about protection, because I think it's so easy for people to get a very tunnel vision idea about what empathy is, or to have some very inspiring experiences, and to think that they can apply it to everything in the world, but perhaps they still have blind spots that aren't addressed, and I think Ray sees that in the community, and I think that concerns him. Yeah.
So you see that the general level of how in how flexible people are in applying their NVC knowledge and skills is very low in the NVC.
I recognize they don't have a fundamental grasp of what NVC is really about. They've learned a few techniques, but they don't really understand how to practice.
Mm-hmm. So they have heard some knowledge, they have practiced it a bit, but they're not really close to living the spirit and integrating it fundamentally into their lives.
Yes, that's what I agree with that. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, and so I suppose that's been a learning for me over the past few years of my expectation of the community being very different from how it actually is, and it's been painful to recognize that. And another painful element is my attempts to create a practice group that really does live to the principles of NVC and gives a chance for real practice is met with so much resistance when I try and do that in the actual NVC groups, particularly by the moderators. But generally I'm experiencing resistance to create a practice group that I'd consider has integrity with the original principles of NVC.
So in your own journey as a new member coming into NVC ABC, you made the experience that you had high hopes for what this community is, and you discovered it's quite different to what you had thought, and you have tried to change that by creating a practice group, and were met with a lot of resistance, and especially also by moderators not understanding a need or a value of such a group.
Yeah, the value of it. Yeah, I think the reputation of NVC itself has been dragged down by the community of people who don't understand what it is.
Mm-hmm. So you see that the standards of what NVC could be have been reduced by a lot of people saying we are doing NVC, but not really understanding what that would imply
Yeah, I know that was the time signal, but I also want to add that I think Ray has a particularly interesting role in the whole dynamic as well, which is different from what I've just described.
Mm-hmm. And you see Ray having a special role, which is different from what you have described so far?
Yes,
Or
thank you.
just in this moment described?
Yes, thanks. I feel heard.
Thank you. James, would you talk to me? Listen.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Cool. Huh. Yeah, I guess I can join Ben in the perception that many people who are attracted to the idea of NVC are not really proficient in staying remaining with the spirit of NVC in a challenging situation.
So you're joining with Ben on the idea that many people who are learning NVC are not willing or interested in using those ideas in a challenging situation.
I would call it neither willing nor interested. I would call it just not able.
You don't think they're able to be in a challenging situation and use those ideas?
Yes, that's right. They are really attracted to the ideas. And I see that those same people see that, again, joining Ben, those people see that the ideas work in less challenging environments.
So they are attracted to the ideas, and they find that they work in certain less challenging situations.
Mm-hmm. And less challenging situations seem to be when they're not personally involved so much. It's like when they are faced with a partner or a child, that's the challenging situations. And when they're helping a friend or maybe an online friend, empathizing with them, that's the easier situations, which inspire this hope, oh, this is working, but yeah, leave the problem of the really high conflict zones.
So the level or type of conflict they like to engage with is talking to a child, or talking to their partner, or helping a friend online.
You got that wrong. No, I was describing two settings which are different. The sandbox is talking to someone they don't really know a lot, with unrelated, a friend online they've never met. And the challenging situations which they can't handle in with NVC spirit is when they talk to their own child or their partner.
Okay, so the talking to strangers online is the sandbox, and they like to do that, but they can't handle the more intimate relationships of their own children or their own partners.
Well, I see that from my own experience, and so I'm struggling with the closer relationships. And this it can happen also with strangers when they are bringing a lot of differences, and then again the container breaks because it's not a very strong container of being able to use the NVC ideas in a challenging situation.
The container of talking to a stranger. Sorry, I didn't follow that.
It's not just limited. So I've described that the container can be seemingly strong when talking about some superficial issues with a stranger, and it can break easily when they talk to family, and it can also break easily when they talk to a stranger, but about challenging ideas which shake the foundations of their worldview.
The container seems to hold when talking to a stranger about light things. The container doesn't hold in the difficult conversations with their intimate partners, and it doesn't hold in conversations with strangers where they're talking across beliefs that challenge their worldview.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that was my time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Edwin, would you listen to me?
Listening.
I invited Dominic to have an empathy circle with me, and I posted about it in 2 or 3 different places, you know, to get Dominic, to notify Dominic, and I didn't receive an answer from him one way or the other.
So you invited Dominic into an empathy circle in a couple places, so he should have seen it, and you got no response.
In fact, he did see it because he responded to the post, and he didn't respond interested or not interested. He said, well, I don't consider this a counter proposal to my proposal. That's so he didn't answer. He saw it but didn't answer.
So he did see it. He said he made a post. You invited him to an empathy circle, and then he responded that you didn't respond. You weren't responding to his initial post. So, and then he just sort of ignored your invitation.
Yes, up to this point. And ordinarily, I wouldn't. I mean, people, of course, are free to say yes or no or be silent. However, him and the admin of the RC group are kind of working in tandem. And as soon as Dominic made his proposal, Mikhail is now, the admin is now saying he'd like people to say agree or disagree in the next 48 hours. And, you know, based on Dominic not responding to my post, I think it would be totally legitimate, you know, for people just not to respond. And it's the idea that what I'm suggesting is not a counter proposal is patently absurd. It's basically they're making this kind of cookie cutter that your legitimate proposal will fit into this really neat box. Otherwise, we won't even consider it. I'm okay. Look, if they want to say having an empathy circle or having an empathy circle series is not how I'd like to deal with the issues in this group, that's totally different. Fine. You have a different strategy. But to say that it's not even a proposal is really a way to avoid the issue.
Okay, so Dominic said this, basically saying this is not within the context of a response, and this is outside of it, and it's sort of like dismissing what you're saying. You feel it's relevant. It is a response. He's saying it's outside and sort of dismissing it, and I guess you're like don't feel good about that, or you don't.
That's an understatement. I am angry about it. I'm angry about the way I'm being met. I don't think I'm being met, you know, in good faith.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not at all the first time where I've been met with silence from Dominic.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah, so you get met with, instead of some kind of a response of what you're saying, you get silence, and this sort of the silent treatment is something that you've gotten repeatedly from Dominic.
Yeah, and the admin of that group, and
And Mikhail.
it's an ambiguity. It creates. I actually then I just don't know if they're interested or not, and I have to just then I have to I'm left with is going into fantasy, and I don't see that as a sustainable way to create a community. You know, up to a point, I can say there's a guy who's well known and doing a lot of work like Dominic does, and he can't answer everybody. But in this case, it was a perfect example of I had asked a question clearly to him, got no response. Then he started his own topic, and he started people responded to him, and he was engaging with them. So it was clearly, you know, it was a strategic way of dealing with me. It wasn't just you know, it wasn't just that he overlooked it answering me. It was, you know, I'm gonna not answer. I'm gonna leave it ambiguous, and let's see what happens. And I responded to that by saying, I'm not gonna read your proposal. I'm not reading your proposal. If this is the game we're gonna play, that we're gonna pretend not to see things, and we're gonna try to have conversations without reading comments and not responding to direct questions, I can play that game too.
So it's like there's sort of an ignoring of what people are saying, and it's upsetting. You feel angry about it, and you feel like it's a game. So if you're going to ignore something, I'm going to ignore something too. I don't know if I quite got that, but
yeah, it's good enough. I've been, you know, communication is a cooperative activity. And if we want to destroy communication, we can do it. We can do it by ignoring what people say easily.
So you'd like a sort of a communication, reciprocal communication, and this ignoring of things is a way to, it kind of destroys communication. And
yes.
You would like, you know, constructive communication and not things being ignored, because that doesn't support communication. That was the time too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll speak to Nellie. Yeah, I think it's very legitimate. I've seen that same dynamic in the RC group. You post something, it's sort of ignored, you know, and so it is sort of a thing that's in that group. So I do see that.
So you have personal experience of being treated in a similar way? You post something and there's a void of response to it.
Yeah. And I do find it interesting that a request was made for an empathy circle with, I guess, Dominic or maybe Mikhail, and there's no response. Yet they're doing restorative circles, wanting to invite other people into this restorative circle process. And so they're wanting people to come. But it's like, so I think that's sort of a inconsistency, or sort of like a lack of integrity, that, oh, we want you to come into our restorative circles, but when we do an empathy circle, that, you know, we're not even going to talk to you. So I mean, what is that sort of about, really? Yeah.
So say they see a need to have restorative circles. They have their own process and they want people to join them in their process. But when someone asks them to join a slightly different process, they are not open to use that, even if they think it's inferior. But yeah.
And it's not a different process. It's the same goddamn process, folks. It's like, you know, Dominic is like, oh, I need credit for having done restorative circles. Give me credit, everybody. And he never gives credit to Carl Rogers. We're talking active listening, empathic listening, which Carl Rogers created in sort of a one-to-one sort of dynamic. What Dominic is doing is mutual empathic listening, exactly what we're doing here. It's slightly structured. I think there's no time limits or something, but it's the exact same process. If you do an empathy circle, you are getting trained for doing a restorative circle. What we are doing here is like the first step to doing a restorative circle.
So you think it's weird that they don't give credit to the origins of where restorative circles come from? They want other people to say when they were inspired by restorative circles, but they don't honor the contribution of Carl Rogers and also the contribution that empathy circles serve in creating an skill and knowledge about listening to each other in a community in an empathic way.
It's the same process. We're using the same process Carl Rogers did it in a therapeutic context, just listening to one person. And all we're doing is making it mutual, right? It's like it's not just a therapist. There's no therapist. You don't even need a facilitator here, right? It's like if everybody knows the process, we just do this empathic listening. And so we do have that same foundational core. And it's the essence. If there was no empathic listening, restorative circles wouldn't work. They would go nowhere.
So Carl Rogers had this in a one-on-one conversation setting, laid the foundation, and empathy circles is using it in a group setting. And when everyone is aware of how it's working, we don't even need one person who sticks out as a leader or facilitator, therapist, and it just can work on its own. And it's the foundation which is the driving energy behind why restorative circles work.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly, got it exactly. And so this is kind of like coming up with problems with the NVC. We almost need like a circle just to go through, the failures of NVC. Why is NVC not working? I mean, it has a lot of great stuff, and it's based again on Carl Rogers' work. What we're doing here is the foundational practice, I think, for all of NVC. And there's like people, they've been 10, 15 years in NVC, and they can't even take part in an empathy. They're not even familiar. They don't want to take part in an empathy circle. They don't know how to take part in it. They don't have trust in it. There is something fundamentally wrong in NVC, right? Really, at least how it's practiced, so. Yeah, it's humorous. It's like existentially like crazy. We could laugh because it is so kind of crazy in some sense.
So you see the same thing happening for NVC communities. It's based on the work of Carl Rogers. It's based on what we are doing here right now. And yet there are people who have practiced NVC for 10, 20 years, and they have never really made it a regular practice to take part in an empathy circle. They feel frightened by the idea, and they don't see value in that.
Where are the NVC folks here? So with that part, I will say, I'm heard.
Right. Ben, would you listen to me?
Yeah, sure.
Tried having a good time for seeing the irony, the blind spots that are present in ourselves and others.
Enjoying having a good time, seeing the irony of the blind spots that are present in ourselves and others.
Which is sad and also funny. And when James was talking about that the communication is a two-way thing, that two people are working together, and if one is just not playing the part, then there's no communication, no dialogue happening. I was just reminded of what has happened just before when I was speaking to James. I noticed that I had some ideas and I felt very much slowed down in my ability to convey those ideas by the way James did reflect me.
Okay, so you were thinking about what James was saying, and you felt very slowed down in your ability to have those ideas in the way that James was reflecting you.
Mm-hmm. I had a sense that it was very difficult for me to make him understand why this would be an interesting topic. So I didn't have his attention for that what I was sharing. I had a sense that
You found it very difficult to convince him why it'd be an interesting topic, so you felt like you didn't have his attention in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And this is not to blame James. This is just to so what I want to bring in is the idea that maybe for Dominic that's also not some malicious way of blocking out the conversation, draining the energy out of this dialogue between James and Dominic, but it's happening because maybe his interest or his energy is not in the dialogue.
Yeah, so you're thinking it might be similar for Dominic, that he's not maliciously blocking out James, but he's just not interested in it. His interest and energy isn't in the dialogue, so it's just not on his radar in the same way.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that I find it difficult to focus on, to listen to someone when I'm tired or when some thoughts are on my mind that are important to me and taking away my attention.
Yeah, you find it difficult to listen to someone when you're tired, or there's some thoughts on your mind that are important to you and taking away your attention.
Mm-hmm. So that's one side of there are other things going on for me. And the other side is when the thoughts that are coming in are very different from what I know. If someone tells me about a philosopher where I have never read any texts of them, and I would really start with zero knowledge and people are talking about that, and it just sounds like Japanese to me. So I'm just overwhelmed with the amount of information coming in.
Okay, so the idea of something just not being on your, the idea of like some blocking information if you're tired, that's one side of the coin. The other side is if people are talking about things that are alien to you and you just don't have any information, like a philosopher that you haven't read anything about, and it's just like Japanese to you, like it's just, you feel little energy to get involved.
Yeah. Mm. I'm curious about where the energy of people is right now, and what topic would work better. For example, James and me, such that the communication could flow more easily, or also between Ben and me, or Edwin and me.
So you're wondering what topic could happen that would make the communication flow more easily between anyone in this group?
Mm-hmm. And again, I would like to say anyone else, so I'll just say I feel fully heard. So it's frustrating to be at the end.
Yeah, but you feel fully heard. You feel like you're at the end of what you got to say.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you called into question the perception.
Who are you speaking to?
Oh yeah, well, I'll speak to you, Edwin.
Okay, listening.
It's interesting to me that Nelly called into question the perception of what's happening. Of James, Dominic could be maliciously playing a game.
Oh, you're muted. Somehow I got muted.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting that Nelly called into question the perception of what Dominic might be doing, or his motivation for what he might be doing. Whether he's playing a game or whether he's just not interested for some reason that's not immediately apparent. And it makes me wonder about my perception about the entire context of this conversation, really. I'm wondering about why I care so much about the NVC community and the RC community and in general the empathy communities. I mean, there's always the possibility that I could go off and just start my own community, or which is sort of something we're doing with the joining game, or and I can think of ways to attract large numbers of people to join in that, although they wouldn't have the same training and initiation into the same practices. I can think of ways to do that. But so I'm thinking about these particular contentions with these people like Dominic Barter and Ray Taylor and what they're doing. And I'm thinking, well, it would be just as easy for me to pick a fight with, like the Christian church. Like, there's certain denominations. I'm a member of some very right-wing extremist Christian church groups on Facebook. And it would be just as easy for me to pick a fight with some of them as it would be to, pick a fight with Dominic Barter or Ray Taylor.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is that you found it interesting how Nelly was trying to understand where Dominic Barter is coming from, because she was trying to put herself in his, seeing things from his perspective, and you find it. You're kind of looking at why are you personally so interested in, in the NVC community, the restorative circle community, the empathy circle community, and you're sort of just questioning why you're interested in it, because you could be going to other groups and be creating, picking a fight with them and, being involved in what they're doing. So you're kind of just sitting with that question of why you're interested in these groups.
Yeah, and that's one question. The other question is just my perception of what's happening and how that affects my engagement in those groups. So if I perceive that they're all fucking up all of Marshall Rosenberg's work, and they're fucking up the empathy circle work, and doing all ruining all of this positive stuff that's happened, that and then I engage from that perspective, then I'm going to come to them very antagonistically. But if I choose a different perspective, that they're learning and they're very uninitiated and very unexperienced, and of course much more fully multifaceted human beings.
Then, so instead of coming at them from sort of a judgmental, they don't know what they're doing, they're all screwed up, they have malicious intent, if you come from that point of view, it's different than if you come at it from a point of view that, hey, they're learning, they're growing. And so it depends on how you're coming at it. Kind of your attitude is going to affect things.
That's true. And it's interesting the people that the NVC online community have attracted. I've had some very positive experiences going to in real life NVC workshops. One in particular with Vicky Pierce, which was, I think I went twice, and they were both incredible. And I've also had some very bad experiences with NVC workshops too, where I was offended by the training I didn't feel like I had a chance to say anything about it.
So you've had sort of mixed experiences in-person empathy, NVC workshops, like very positive experiences and also experiences where you couldn't really share anything or really talk, and so
Yeah,
negative experiences.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess the thing that I find really frustrating is how much value that I see there and how much value being lost, you know, how much potential there is there and how it's sort of being wasted by, you know, certain things that are going on, certain conflicts that are going on that aren't being addressed. And what's really frustrating to me is that these conflicts aren't being addressed. They're just being kind of like, you know, everyone's acting like school children and just like fucking playing games and messing around, and people aren't actually willing to enter into a forum and hammer it out, you know.
So it seems like there's sort of, you see a lot of potential in those communities, but it's just there's sort of this conflict. People aren't really addressing the conflict, and it sounds like you're feeling disappointed, or that, hey, why don't they just get together and kind of hammer out these, work through these issues and conflicts. And
Thanks, I feel heard.
Okay, I'll speak back to you since I haven't spoken to you yet, Ben. Let's see, we start the clock. Yeah, it's, I just guess I wanted to go into NVC itself as a, you know, a lot of this is coming from an NVC community, like maybe address some of the problems I'm seeing in NVC. And the first one is the name, I think is a really bad name, you know, nonviolent communication. And I would actually think a better name would be empathic communication. That the core of NVC, I think the underlying spirit is not some vague nonviolence, but it's an active empathic communication. So I think that's like the first problem I see.
Yeah, so you want to go into NVC and really have a look at NVC, and the first problem that you see is the name, nonviolent communication, because it's not some vague intention for nonviolence. It's an active empathic, in the real spirit of it, it's an active empathic intention.
Yeah, and I heard Marshall Rosenberg, a recording of him talking about that he didn't like the name either. It's like, and the understanding I get was that he created the name, I guess, to build on Gandhi's work, but then he kind of got stuck with it. And it's like, okay, now all these people know the name, I can't change it. But if he would have started with empathic communication, which is what we're doing here, because I see what we're doing here is actually the core of the practice, I think it would have helped a lot instead of this muddled nonviolence term. So that's kind of like the first problem I see.
Yeah, so you see that he started with the name, you heard him say in the recording, he took the name building on Gandhi's work, but you think that if the name was empathic communication, which is what we're doing here, that we'd have much clearer focus, there'd be a much clearer focus instead of this muddled sort of approach.
Yeah, be more focused on the empathy part of it. How do we, you know, nurture and expand that empathy? So, yeah. So, let's see. The second problem I'm seeing is sort of the drive for addressing your own needs. That has an individualistic, almost narcissistic quality to it. It's like, oh, my needs and your needs, and it's like it's all me, and my needs. And what's missing is sort of a relational needs, which I think a culture of empathy addresses. It's like the culture has a need as a whole, and it needs empathy as a culture, as a foundational value. So this obsession on you know, my needs, individualistic needs, I think is another problem.
Yeah, so you see another problem, which is this obsession on individualistic needs, which is like, you know, it's all about, you know, getting one's own needs met, but there isn't the same focus on like relational sort of needs. So
right.
You know, the culture as a whole needs empathy, which is different from this narcissistic sort of approach that NVC can foster.
Yeah, it's like Ray is saying, oh, I need safety, right? This is not safe. So he can kind of dismiss empathy and empathic dialogue by saying it's not safe. And that somehow justifies it, versus saying a culture of empathy is based on empathy. And, you know, ideally we would, if we have a conflict, we would come into an empathy circle like this, and maybe I am not capable, I'm too nervous about doing it and just taking responsibility. I have anxiety, I have fear about taking part in this. So it kind of shifts the how we see it. I don't know if that was clear, but
yeah, I think I got it.
okay.
So Ray's saying that he has a, like, you know, he has a need for safety, and that kind of justifies that, you know, okay, I have a need for safety, I don't need to participate in these empathy circles, rather than anything would actually open up dialogue, like saying, you know, well, I do feel anxious, you know, I feel concerned in participating, and some of those things might actually create a path to connection and participating.
Yeah, and so the intention is that if there is a conflict, we would naturally go into something like an empathy circle, right? It's like, oh, the culture would be a cultural norm that this is, of course we go into an empathy circle, we've got a conflict here. Of course we do it. So there's like a shift, which is a cultural value of empathy. It's a relational cultural value. So that shifts it from, oh, my individual needs, so.
Yeah, so there'd be a shift, like it's like almost a no-brainer, like, you know, there's a conflict here, so, you know, let's go into empathy circle, let's, you know, let's do it. Like, it was such an obvious thing that we could do when we have a conflict. So you'd like to see a cultural shift that is something that happens.
Yeah, so it is sort of, I guess we need a whole empathy circle just to explore. Maybe we'll do another series on the failure of NVC. That might get some attention. And that could be another, you know, series or something.
Yeah, so maybe we could do another series about the failure of NVC. That'd be another series that might get some attention.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Cool. So what you're saying is painful to hear, because
who are you speaking to?
Oh, who am I speaking to? I'll speak to James.
Okay.
So yeah, what Edwin's saying is painful to hear, because it's like, it's such a symptomatic thing of what's happened to NVC rather than what it's supposed to be, because the focus on needs is absolutely clear. It should be that you do focus on your own needs in the same way you focus on your own goals, and needs can be, you know, interpersonal. In fact, most of the needs are interpersonal. Marshall really made a point of listing lots of interpersonal needs in relation to a smaller number of personal needs, and making a focus that, you know, most of our needs are related to others. So that, you know, it's one thing, and it's just something that I've seen happen to the NVC community and the way that it's interpreted. And there's so many little things like that I hate about the way it's been interpreted, that just shift it away from what I think, and you know, I think Marshall Rosenberg really meant when he was trying to do it. And I don't see it so similar from what, you know, we're doing here. Like, you know, when there were conflicts, we saw Marshall Rosenberg actually go into conflict situations very directly and deal with conflicts. And I don't see that happening in the NVC community. Few people do it a little bit, and they get a round of applause and pat on the back when they do it. In fact, it was offensive going to the NVCe global event and seeing a few people kind of paraded around who were actually putting themselves into conflict situations, and the way that people kind of, like, you know, applauded, and, you know, I don't know.
Can I reflect you?
Yeah.
So you think that it's tragic. So the things that Edwin was saying is that it's like a symptom of how it's being misinterpreted, that actually Marshall was really clear about there being interpersonal needs. But there's that and a number of ways in which the people who are prominently practicing it are so badly misinterpreting. No?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's just so badly misinterpreting. Yeah. Badly
misinterpreting it, that it's that, you know, Marshall himself put himself into conflict situations and mediated conflict. And you're saying that, like, there are a few people, it was painful to watch how at the Global Festival or the CNVC Festival, there was, you know, some people who are held up as being, these people deal with conflict, but it wasn't happening at the event.
Yeah, it wasn't happening at the event. Yeah, it wasn't being practiced there. For example, I mean, another good example is that you're talking about the protective use of force and the way that that's been applied in the, you know, people have, like, you know, said, okay, we're using protective use of force, but then they just haven't got in contact again afterwards. You know, another one like that. There's so many of it. I could write a paper on just exactly how far the community has deviated from the original intention of nonviolent communication.
Yeah, so the misuse, misinterpretation of protective use of force is just another one, and there's just so many ways that it's being misinterpreted and mispracticed.
That's right. And I don't see any real serious efforts to do anything about that, even by the admins, especially by the admins, like people like Ray Taylor. Like, you know, they abbreviate observations, feelings, needs, requests to OFNR, and then talk about how valuable it is. And the problem with that is the way that people use OFNR, because they don't actually ever really make sure they're getting their observations clear, and they don't ever, a lot of the time they just skip feelings because, you know, what the hell, let's skip feelings, we'll go straight to needs, and then request is left off as well. So, you know, all it is just people talking about needs half the time. You know, and then there's this discussion about, is this a need or not? And that isn't even, you know, why does it's basically asking, is what I'm bringing valid or not? And, you know, so it's almost like NVC has turned into, you know, can I bring this in a valid way? You know, am I valid in bringing this? It's almost like this validation bug. It's like, you know, yes, I can say this, and no, I can't say, no, you can't say that. And that's all it's become.
So the whole process gets abbreviated into OFNR, observation, feeling, needs, request, and then people don't even do that. They don't check the observations, or they don't make requests, and what they
Even
do,
feelings get left out.
Feelings get left out. What they do is then they question whether the needs are valid by saying, is that really a need? And so it becomes a kind of jockeying of, like, is it valid for you to bring what you're bringing?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of like, some of it is worse. Yeah, that's some of the worst practice that I've seen. So yeah, I feel disillusioned with the online NVC community. I've seen some valuable things happening in real life. A few and far between valuable things happening in real life, like the workshops I mentioned earlier. They were very powerful. With Vicky Pierce, they were very powerful.
You've been to in-person events, NVC events, that have been powerful and valuable to you.
Yeah,
Vicky Pierce and maybe others.
Yeah. But yeah, just like, I mean, being banned from being not included in some NVC events, in Shanti Garba's ones, because of my Facebook posting reputation. Like, you know, and he said, you can't come because of your reputation. It's like, and he won't, you know, there's no dialogue about it. He said he might be up for some kind of dialogue, so I proposed several forums that we could talk in, and he just never responded to that email. So it's like, you know, he's teaching NVC. He's teaching, but he won't engage with me about why he's excluding me from his course.
Yeah, so you applied to a course with Shanti Garba, and he tells you can't participate because you have a bad Facebook reputation, and you tried to pursue dialogue with him about that, and he just basically just drops it.
Yeah, thanks.
Nellie, would you listen to me, please? Yeah, I agree with a lot of what I've been hearing. There's an idea that I'd like to bring, which is great people in history are often revered and not understood. And I want to avoid revering great people, and I want to understand them. And that's the approach that I bring to everyone that I study, and also, therefore, to the teachers within the NVC community or similar communities like Dominic Carter in the RC community. I'd like to understand what he's saying and putting forward, and then determine if it makes sense or not.
So you have also in a historical context, you see that people often who are seen as really doing important work by many people, that those people who are fascinated by those people, they are not really, they adore those people, but they don't really understand what those people are doing. And you want for yourself to take a different approach. You try to really understand what someone whose work you appreciate is doing.
Yeah, and normally I wouldn't want to or need to talk to the actual individual. You know, there are things called books and writing, and there's not a lot of written material about restorative circles or Dominic's work. And you know, I live near the Haudenosaunee territory, the indigenous people of upstate New York, and their indigenous tradition, they created a restorative indigenous tradition called the Great Law of Peace. And there are books about that work. When I go into the RC group, I don't need to talk to Dominic. There's 2,000 people there. I'm willing to talk to anybody there. Nobody engages with me. So what does that mean about a community? The pandemic was 4 months. You know, last year when I suggested online circles, restorative circles, whatnot, people said it doesn't work online. Well, guess what? You've got a situation in the world where people, it's lethally dangerous to meet in person. Was there any discussion in that group about how we could overcome that and maybe try to do the restorative circles work by distance? No, not a single word about it. So what's going on? Where are the people who are supposedly doing restorative circles with their concerns about how to do restorative circles during a pandemic? There wasn't a single post about that. So I just get this impression that the group is like a Hollywood facade. It's like there's actually nothing going on. And show me the evidence that somebody's doing a restorative circle. Obviously, it's an exaggeration. Yeah, please.
So you're noticing that in this community in this Facebook group of restorative circles, the pandemic, which made in-person meetings impossible for a while, and all they were ever doing was in-person meetings, and so they didn't engage with the question of how do we do it in a new way. It's like they are not alive. They are not learning and integrating new things that come into their lives. They're just like a facade.
Yeah. And so I totally loved Edwin's point about how Dominic always asks for credit for the people in the favelas and their development of the restorative circles. And that point about empathic listening, don't think the empathic listening component, which Edwin's right, it's a fundamental part of the restorative circles. Where is the acknowledgement of that? It's easy to attack the leader. It's easy to blame the leader for all of the community's problems. But what I'm trying to say is, I've been trying to find a way around that, and nobody will engage me because everybody is looking to the leader. When I say, hey, maybe we could do it like this, maybe we could do a restorative circle, maybe we could have a practice group, people talk about it as if it's a church with a priesthood. And they ask, you know, is your restorative circle pure enough? Is your practice group pure enough to appear here, to even be discussed here? That's deeply disturbing. You know, I prefer the academic world, where when somebody has an idea, they publish it for everyone to know. And then if somebody has a legitimate disagreement, they know where that idea is and they can respond to it in a journal. And the way it's working in that group is, it's like a church with secret practices and priests that hold on. And if you try to talk, you get this to them, you get the silent treatment, and you get told, well, you don't understand the practice. And that's not a community that I think is sustainable for, you know, wider spread conflict engagement.
So you have tried to engage with other people than the prominent figures in the community, or that one prominent figure, which is Dominic Barta, and nobody was available for that. And
It's fine.
yeah. Well, I can use my share to explore that further. Or do you want to feel heard?
You got me. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Edwin, would you like to listen to me?
Yep, listening.
Okay. So, yeah, this idea of there is no literature, not so much literature on the restorative circles, and there's no system where, like in a university, where you can propose one theory and then others can come and challenge that, and there's some kind of dialogue or discourse. Yeah, that's interesting to me. I wonder if I have personal experience about that.
Yeah, so you're kind of building on what James said about restorative circles. There's no real sort of written material about it, and it's also not like in academia where you write a paper about it and the people respond, and there's sort of that type of dialogue going on. So you're just kind of thinking about that.
I'm really looking for my own experience in this field, and I learned about restorative circles shortly after I have learned about NVC. And I learned that it's an idea to create a personal support system for myself. And I was learning it in a course, and I was asking in that course, is it possible to from the people who are in this course within this group to form some practice group? And it was I was not even the only person who was asking this. There was another person, and there was no way how we were matched up. So Molly Rowan Leach was leading this this group, and there's recordings where I ask about the practice group, and I think it would have helped to have people who are interested in the subject connect. And I was just very far detached from everything, so I was not yet present in. I didn't go to Facebook, so I didn't see that there's a community on Facebook.
So you took some restorative circle training, and you would have found it helpful to have some kind of a support group where you could have an ongoing group. You made a comment about it, and there was sort of nothing came back. There was no sort of mechanism for building that support group, and you were just getting started too with the practice, and weren't even on Facebook, so you didn't have that gateway. So it sounded like you're kind of missing having a group to
yeah, and there were other people interested, other students interested in that as well, and nobody helped us to connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those other people had the same desire for a support group, and there was no, like, the facilitators didn't kind of help you get connected and set that up, and so maybe feeling some disappointment about that.
Maybe, yeah, I think that would be maybe comparable to a university structure where if you join, then the practice, if you meet with the practice, then someone shows you here there's a library you can and there you can get this work with people on in this work group or in this work group, and that didn't happen to me.
So it sounds like you would have liked more of a step-by-step process of how to get involved with restorative circles. It's like you take the class, there's a support group, and then there's other material. Or you would have appreciated that kind of support?
No.
Okay.
I would have appreciated to enter a structure that's already there and that's encouraging or helping to raise the level of knowledge of the community. Not necessarily something fixed or something we read those 10 rules and then do the next 10 steps or whatever, but just some space. Here is a group. Here you meet 3 other people and now self-organize and continue your work or something like that.
Yes, you would have liked some support for just creating your own sort of support group, like bringing a few people together. Here's how you get kind of started. We're going to help you with some scheduling. Here's the steps of how to do that. And now you've got this support group where you can kind of work together with others who are interested in the practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I'm curious why this is not there, and maybe it's there if I would have asked in the Facebook group. But once I joined the Facebook group, I already had my support system, and I didn't feel like so much interest anymore in the community.
Yeah, so you're just wondering why wasn't that support there, and maybe there's other support that you didn't know about. And that was the time too, if you just want to wrap it up.
Okay.
You feel like wrapped up.
That's fine.
Okay. Let's see. I guess I'll speak back to you then, Nelly.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, there's. I guess what's coming to mind is what James was talking about. There's about the teacher role, and I would say maybe the guru role. So I just kind of thinking about that. And I think when I watch Marshall Rosenberg's trainings online, so I feel sort of disappointed in a sense with the structure. It's like what I see is he sits on the stage, he says there's this thing, this state of being, nonviolent communication, it's this state of being. And then And everybody's like, oh, what is he talking about? What does he mean? What is this magical thing going on there? And then he said, yes, you do not understand it, and I will help you understand it. And he gives some kind of role plays and stuff. And everybody's in this state of sort of tension about, I don't understand this. And, and it's just the whole structure of the learning is just not very effective, it seems to me. So I'm kind of, yeah. And it has sort of a guru sort of aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. So you're going back to what James has said about there being in NVC, Marshall was kind of acting like a guru with the way he was trying to teach something to help other people learn something by not doing it, but by doing something very different, like keeping everyone silent and in limbo, in tension, and himself, sparkling with the secret
The wisdom,
knowledge.
yeah, exactly.
Which nobody, all try to learn, but nobody ever can figure out.
Yeah, they're struggling with it, and he doesn't teach it by doing it. He's using mental. He's taking sort of a teacher role to teach something, but not doing it himself. It's like he is not speaking with empathy to the crowd, empathizing with the community, and he is not talking about his own feelings and needs in the moment. So there's I don't quite understand it, but there's somehow where you can have two states at the same time. You can have an empathic state, and then you can have this sort of mental state, and you can be doing both sort of at the same time. But I'm trying to get clear on it myself, but I do not see him actually doing NVC or doing empathic communication in his training, totally, like a total pure empathic communication.
Mm-hmm. So when you see recordings of Marshall's trainings, you see that he's not, to you it looks like he's not really empathically connected to the people who are present?
Fully, yeah. It's not like 100% in the empathic space. There's kind of different spaces that are happening simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. So you're seeing that there's different spaces, maybe an internal space for him?
I think he's in sort of teacher space
Mm-hmm.
and empathic space. We're all in sort of this mixed spaces, right? We're all have some empathy, some domination, some teaching, some, we have all these different states of being that we're in. And, if you're going to be the teaching, ideally, he would have been in a pure and more empathic state, whatever. And I'm having trouble describing it. I have a sense of it, but I need a lot more exploration to kind of really, get clear on what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. So here you perceive that something in every one of us is moving through different states where we are more open to what's coming in from others and letting out what's really alive in us, and less. And when in a teacher mode, this is maybe a bit more closed, and you see the trainings Marshall was doing, like having this more closed state.
For example, could the teaching have been is to the group, to the community? It's like, what I hear you say, or sort of empathize with the group, right? Or he could have spoken about his own felt experience in the moment and his needs in being on the stage. Like, oh, I'm feeling, I'm feeling excited, or hey, I feel bored with this group, or I feel like, hey, I don't have any money and I'm feeling totally stressed. So he could have actually used the process in how he was teaching it instead of stepping outside of it in this intellectual mode, and then sort of, hey, why don't you all kind of figure out this magic stuff and, come, crawling to me, you know, as a guru, and it's like, oh, you have this great knowledge, and we're the dummies here, kind of, and then and they get some kind of an insight, and they feel good about it and stuff. So it's kind of complicated, but yeah.
So you could imagine a different way how he could have maybe taught it while using NVC,
Mm-hmm.
and that might have included to be really open to what's alive for him in this moment, and also share that to the community.
Exactly, and it might have influenced the whole trajectory of NVC. So he kind of created this core, you know, dynamic, and everybody else now wants to be a guru, an NVC guru, and, you know, have a facilitator and be, you know, everybody look up to you and all that kind of stuff. So it has some kind of fundamental teaching, kind of something is missing there, and I'm going over my time.
So you see that maybe something he laid the groundstone for what NVC has become, and everybody kind of uses the same thing, which is a bit off.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Yeah. James, would you listen to me?
Yes.
Sorry, Ben, I just ignored you because I didn't see your picture.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's okay. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit tired at the moment anyway, so I'm happy to be not to be listening. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something interesting, that if we have a blind spot and if we allow it to exist then we build something up, and we exclude the voices which tell us this is not really good, then it can easily happen that something is growing large and at the same time not being really healthy.
Yeah, so if a group excludes a certain voice or a certain idea, it's easy to then grow, and having not integrated that concern, some unhealthy dynamic can proliferate or become very large.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what part of what has been happening both in NVC and RC. And I want to revert to my understanding how learning happens, because when I was a kid, I thought I'm learning from the teacher. So someone is sharing and I'm learning from them. And what I found out in this personal support system way of learning is that I'm taking in new information best when someone else when I'm really curious about what someone else is bringing, and I'm really curious when I see that my curiosity is of value to someone. And so in the support circle, we have the idea from Dominic Barta that someone is saying, I'd like to have someone listen to me empathically, be curious about what's going on for me. And I have a capacity in myself to listen to that person. Then we meet, I listen, the other person shares, and then I take in all this information because I'm really I feel space for looking at that person.
Can I just get that?
Yeah,
So look, you're thinking about your understanding of learning and how when you were a child you thought it came from a teacher, but then as you've matured, it's changed, and you understand that it happens through having genuine curiosity. And so in this support circle group that you've created, following some of the ideas you've learned from Dominic Barter, and that's where I lost you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have two things meet. One is that a person really wants my curiosity. They tell me, please listen to me. And the other is I have capacity to listen. And if those two things meet, I can learn a large amount. That's my best learning strategy.
So there's two conditions that need to be met in order for the ideal learning environment to be created. That's someone has to have a desire to be listened to and then asked, and then ask for that, and then there has to be another person who's willing and curious about what's going on for
capable
capable
not willing.
You have to be capable of listening.
Yeah, and I see the NVC idea there coming in because it's so much value if someone really wants to have me. That's giving a lot of energy to me, a lot of helps me to do the work, whatever it is. If someone really wants that and is met with me giving it joyfully, offering it joyfully, my listening, and the other person really wanting that's the NVC, how the support system meets the NVC spirit.
The NVC spirit meets your group spirit when the common ground is that effective listening happens when there's genuine willingness.
A genuine need for something and a joyful giving, something, yeah. Capacity to offer that, and
genuine need on one hand, and then on the other hand, genuine willingness and capacity.
Mm-hmm. To offer that. Yeah. Well, anyway, over to you.
Edwin, would you listen to me?
Listening, yes.
So there was a book that came out 3 years ago, The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And they talk about something called anti-fragility, which is environments or situations that allow people to develop and learn. And the example that they give is the playground, that if you have, that the purpose of a playground is for children to learn how to manage risk on their own. And that if the playground is too dangerous, it's no good, because then the children just die. But if it's too safe, then the children also don't learn how to manage risk, decisions about where to not, when not to leap, or how far to climb. And so he plots how playgrounds have actually become these defanged environments where it's impossible to hurt oneself, and that has had a deleterious effect on childhood development. And so that obsession with fragility has then taken over, that's what all of this kind of obsession with the idea that language is violent has come from. that we're all like balloons and the world is all just pins and we have to protect ourselves. And that to me is exactly the ideology that is that is taken over the NVC community and results in someone like Ray saying, it's dangerous. We have to protect everyone. Everybody in this group is a balloon and everything outside of this group is a pin. And this ideology of safetyism, that words are harmful and dangerous, this is really important. It actually creates violence because it prevents people from being able to distinguish between physical violence and emotional pain. And so if I think that you are being violent because you said that I was full of shit, then in my mind, punching you in the face is not any different. I haven't distinguished between the two, and so I feel justified in punching you in the face. So the danger of saying that these kinds of language are equivalent to violence actually winds up creating an environment where violence is, there's a higher potential for real physical violence.
Okay, so that's quite a bit. But it sounds like the core is that there's sort of a range where growth happens. If you're too protected, you don't grow. And if there's too much, you get overwhelmed. But there's a space for growth. And that's what playgrounds were about, is a space for relational growth with just sort of, it's not overly dangerous, but not too safe either. And there's this concept of fragility that you have to really protect people.
Anti-fragility would be
anti-fragility. Yeah, it's like, oh, people are fragile. They have to be protected. They have to be protected from words. And so you create this space of, inhibiting words and shutting down words. And that itself, that protection becomes a...
Well, so I just want to clarify, actually, the anti-fragility term is used in a sense of, we're not fragile, we don't want to be fragile. It's okay to be in an environment which has a little bit of risk. Mm-hmm. And it's the safetyism that is the this preponderance on, you're too fragile, you don't take any risk.
So there's this mindset, like it sounds like even you see in NVC, that's what maybe Ray is doing. It's like there's this fragility, no risk, got to have all this protection. And then the anti-fragile is sort of, well, you got to have a space for some risk because that's where growth sort of happens. And that actually that, fragility, safety can actually lead to forms of violence because the words, you put words out there, you got to protect from the words, and then it legitimizes using physical violence in response to words.
Yeah, in particular, this belief that offensive words are the equivalent of violence, and that's where I do agree with you about the problem with naming the practice nonviolent communication, because it gives that's the exact message that comes across, that the wrong words, the wrong communication is the same as physical violence. Mm-hmm.
So that's where you're seeing the problem with another aspect of the problem with the name nonviolent communication, because it's associating words with actual physical violence, and it fits within that model of fragility
yes.
Yeah. So, that was the time to...
Oh, thank you. I feel heard.
Yeah. I'll speak back to you then.
Listening.
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. What I find kind of interesting is the people who are on the margins, like the NVC margins. Like I think Ben and Nellie and you are seen as sort of marginal people within these communities. And it's the marginal people that show up for an empathic dialogue. I was kind of like just sort of, I don't know, just finding it kind of humorous that's that sort of how it's probably seen, right? It's like,
Yeah, so you see us as being kind of in the margins or on the outside of those communities, and it's interesting and humorous about us showing up. Why is it that we're the ones who show up for the empathic dialogue?
Yeah, and the people who are in it, you know, who are in the NVC groups, it's been posted all over the place. They don't come into the dialogue, you know. So I'm just noticing it and saying, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, what is that all about? You know, why are the people not just coming in that they would naturally say, yeah, this is what we should be doing. This is the way to do things. This is how we grow and learn, and they don't show up, you know. Plus, it's all the stuff you're talking about with Ray wanting to protect everyone. I mean, it's just very, yeah, it's just like, whoa, what's going on here? It's like,
Yeah, so Ray wants to protect everyone. You'd think that this would be the exact place to show up and talk about how we learn and what nonviolence is and all of that. And it's just, and you know, the invitations are posted everywhere and it's just crickets. No one shows up.
yeah. So, yeah, so what's next? This was going to be the last of the series. I don't know, maybe if we want to continue it, but I have to recreate the event. I find it's been a really great conversation. I just learned a lot from it, and also felt there was a space to express myself, which I really appreciated. And you know, we're modeling the empathic listening. You know, so I find it just very constructive what we're doing here. I think what we're doing is building a culture of empathy.
Yeah, you've learned from being here. It's been an interesting educational conversation, and it is what you want to do, which is to build a culture of empathy. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I appreciate the connection. You know, everyone's presence, and I'm just still kind of curious. Like, where are you all, NVC people, restorative circle people? Where are you? Come into the water. The water's fine. It's maybe a little dangerous, but not too dangerous. You know, you will be heard and understood to your satisfaction. Come on in. We're out here. We're out here off the shore. Come out into the water.
Yeah, you're enjoying the connection here with us, and you want to like really just let people who are not here know that yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, maybe even a little risky, but we're here. Like we're in this space off in the water, off the shore. Please come and check it out, and you'll be heard. We'll listen to whatever it is that your concerns are.
Yeah, and Ray, that means you. Eric, that means you. Dominic, Mickey, the whole group, the whole crowd. Come on in. Let's have a big empathy bath here.
The whole crowd, gurus and all. Let's have an empathy bath.
Yeah. So I feel heard. It's our time too. So I don't know if we just want to do a quick, you know, I had to maybe just do a quick, you know, debrief, you know, take a minute, you know, how was the call for you, and then bring it to an end. That's 2 hours.
Yeah, I'll go first. I absolutely loved this. I absolutely found it stimulating and satisfying, and it's, for me, this is a very constructive direction, and I appreciate being having company on this in this direction.
Yeah, I'll go. I enjoyed the conversation too. I found it very stimulating, and I really loved hearing all the different opinions and hearing everybody voice different voices. I love the discussion about risk averseness, and it ties in so deeply to something, a book I've read by Robert Bly called Iron John, about masculinity, and the way that you know, risk behavior is something that develops in adolescence that is these days often neglected and sort of mollycoddled because of the feminine influence in society. And I really wanted to share that, but I was just feeling so tired by the end that reflecting somebody for 6 minutes and then having 6 minutes to share just felt like such a task that I didn't feel like I could manage that. Yeah, anybody else?
I mean, we had 2 calls directly after each other. I much more appreciated the first call. And I appreciated some of the ideas that came up here. And also I didn't feel like it was easy for me to convey my ideas. I found maybe they were just a bit off topic, and maybe I was bringing this, these ideas. I was the dissenter in this group, and the group was not happy to have a dissenter and treated me accordingly. And maybe it's just because I was tired. So whatever. I appreciate it as a learning experience, and I appreciated that it's recorded and we can go back, or other people can maybe get inspired by that. I've been inspired by Empathy Cafe recordings Edwin has done before so.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll post this online. Sound like you want to say something, James, or am I just misreading that?